So one of the first things that people often notice when they visit San Francisco is that we have a lot of people sleeping on our streets, about 6 to 10,000, and I'm going to take a stab at telling you guys a little bit about why. One myth is that people want to live on the streets, but actually the fact is that our homeless shelters and housing programs are completely full here in San Francisco, and people wait in lines to try to get housing. Another is that homeless people flock to San Francisco. But the mayor's office reports that about 61% of people here became homeless while they were living and working in the city. And I bet more people in this audience actually came from somewhere else. So what's the problem? Why is this happening? And the fact is that homelessness isn't one thing. It's pretty complicated. So on the one hand, we have Adam, who was mugged and became homeless, and he's been living on the streets for years. And then we have Carolina and her family, who recently became homeless after her husband lost his job. And about 80% of homeless people actually look more like Carolina's family and are homeless for a short amount of time. And only about 10% are chronically homeless, living on the streets for years, often with mental health and substance abuse issues. So this isn't because we haven't tried to do anything. In fact, here in San Francisco 10 years ago, Gavin Newsom launched a 10-year plan to abolish chronic homelessness. And 10 years and $1.5 billion later, we've seen some improvements, about a 28% reduction in homelessness, but we're nowhere near abolishing it. We do have really great services here in the city and a lot of organizations I'm sure you guys are familiar with, like Compass Family Services, Glide, St. Anthony's, Hamilton Family. And we have some really innovative programs too, like Project Homeless Connect, which is launched here in San Francisco and brings together services all under one roof, from medical, dental, housing, employment, all kinds of things. And this model has now been replicated in over 200 cities across the country. Because homelessness isn't just a San Francisco thing, it's a national thing. About 3.5 million Americans experience homelessness every year, and while we're on it, 46 million live below the poverty line, which is $23,000 a year for a family of 4. Our mayors say that the top causes of homelessness, from their point of view, are a lack of housing, go figure, unemployment, and just straight up poverty. And what we need to do to solve this is build more affordable and supportive housing and create more employment. So we want to look back in history. A lot of people point to Reagan in the 80s, where we saw major cuts to mental health and housing programs, and modern day homelessness really began at that time. Other people, like the Occupy movement, point toward concentration of wealth. So about 1% of people in the US own over 40% of the wealth. And others, like Thomas Piketty, say in his book Capital in the 21st Century that this is really a global problem, this concentration of wealth, and it leads to social and political instability. So what do we do about this? Because obviously we need to do something if we care about other humans, or simply if we want to avoid another French Revolution. And one thing that I do want to say, and maybe a little moment of Zen, is that I do believe that new solutions to poverty are possible. And if you want to do something to help, you can start small. You can volunteer at one of the organizations that I mentioned. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you can start your own thing. My co-founder, Zach, and I launched Hand Up about a year ago here in San Francisco, and you can go on our site and help Carolina and her family directly and for real. If you want to work within the system, you can help reform the nearly $800 billion that we spend on poverty programs. And if you like to think outside the box, maybe you can come up with something new, maybe something like the universal basic income. So at a minimum, I would love it The next time you pass someone on the street, you can look them in the eye, maybe know a tiny bit more of why they might be there, and simply see them as another human being. Thanks.